I'm Christina Medina, and today I'm going to talk about serial killers and the effects that they have on the general population and what happened to them to make them become serial killers. So, and there's 1,500 reported cases of serial killers in the world. Many of them are different in various ways. They obviously have all murdered multiple people. But what is the common denominator? What is the link between all of them? The link is that 98% of them were abused as children. Number one, of 1,500 cases of serial killers reported in the world, 98% of them were victims of childhood abuse. Two, because they are victims of childhood abuse, they are victims of their environment or nature, meaning that what they perceived as love as children then translates into their adulthood and what they perceive as love as adults. Number one, the statistics are that 36% were physically abused, 26% were sexually abused, 50% were psychologically abused, and 18% were neglected. The source for that is Fiona Guy, 2015. Of the famous serial killers that we have known, there are several that have directly influenced and are reported on the abuse. The first one is Donald Gaskins. He was neglected by his mother. He was beaten by his stepfather. He was raped 10 times by the time he was 16 years of age. He was convicted of killing 8 people. The first of his victims was a man that tried to rape him. The source for that is Crime Museum. The next person is Albert Fish. He was whipped and beaten repeatedly while he was placed into an orphanage. His mother oftentimes did not have enough money to pay for him, so they put him in an orphanage. While he was in the orphanage, he was raped, beaten, and whipped. He was also once released from the orphanage and returned to his mother's care. His mother then forced him to work as a prostitute. He was convicted of cannibalism and killing more than 30 boys. The source for that is Murderpedia. Jerome Brudos. He was mentally tormented by his mother, who did not want a boy, but instead she wanted a girl. She often referred to this and was very upset with him that he was a boy and not a girl. She also would beat him while yelling things at him and mentally tormenting him. He was convicted of killing more than 12 women, all which resembled similar characteristics of his mother. The source for that is biography.com. John Gacy. He was beaten often by his father. He was also forced to watch as his father raped and beat his sisters and his mother. He was convicted of killing more than 12 people. The source for that is biography.com. This is my visual aid. As you can see, it says Effects of the Family, Childhood Abuse. The comparison of serial killers to the general population. This is a study done by Mitchell and Almont in 2005. Here we have the different types of abuse, the general population statistics, and the serial killer statistics. For the type of abuse of physical, general population only is 6%. Serial killers are 36%. Sexual abuse, 3% for the general population and 26% for serial killers. Psychologically abused, 2% for general population and 26% for serial killers. 50% for serial killers. Neglect, 18% of the general population and 18% of serial killers. Other for general population is 6% and is not applicable to serial killers. No abuse reported at all, 70% of the general population, or only 30% of serial killers. As we can see from this chart, it is very clearly indicated that there is a direct link between serial killers and abuse. Number 2. The concept of nurture was brought to be by John Locke in 1690. His interpretation of what nature was and nurture was that nurture was what happened when we were children. We interpret the things in our environment. From the things in our environment, that is when we learn things. So, for example, love. If we, as children, we are kissed and given praise and adored and things of that nature, then we interpret that as love. That is what will translate into our adulthood as love. But instead, we are beaten or tortured or things of that nature that happen to us. That's also what will translate into as adulthood and our interpretation of love when we are adults. Because of these things, the serial killers are victims of nurture. That what they perceived as children to be love, which is abuse and torment, is what happened to them and their cases of love, and obviously that's how they acted out, and that is what their crimes were for. There was an experiment done by Dr. Dario Mastropieri of a question of nature versus nurture. What he did is he had 16 monkeys, 8 of which he took from their birth parents and placed them with adoptive parents. Those adoptive parents were not abusive at all. Then he took 8 more, put them with abusive parents to see what they would do when they got older. Of the 16 monkeys, the 8 that were placed with non-abusive parents, there were no instances of abuse when they became parents themselves. But the monkeys that were placed with the adoptive parents that were abusive, of the 8 monkeys, more than half of them showed signs in it were abusive to their own children. This is a clear indicator of what nurture is. That source for that is Roxanne Kahunisi. So, in conclusion, childhood abuse does have a direct link to serial killers. The things that happen in their childhood has translated over to them, and what they perceive to be love is then acted out in the ways that they received love as children. 98% of them were abused. They are victims of nurture. Our main points are that 98.1 was 98% of serial killers were abused as children, and point 2 is that they're victims of nurture. Although the acts that the serial killers did commit were horrendous and very appalling, they are victims of nurture. And we can clearly see that childhood abuse does have a direct link to serial killers when they got older. So given this information, if we then act upon it and go to the children that were abused as children and give them early intervention and early help so that they can deal with the emotions and issues that have occurred as children, then we can reduce the number of serial killers as they get older. Thank you.